Good evening, Alina. Okay, Mr. Murad.
Yes, Dr. Dawood.
Okay, can I start to introduce the presenter?
Yes.
Okay, okay, thank you so much.
Welcome.
My brothers, everyone, I am pleased to attend you in this important symposium that deals with the corona pandemic and its effects on the education, health, and the economy. And all of these sectors take care for the human being and its future. And through all of you, let me to welcome for the teachers and friends from the Russian Federal for this efforts, and it will be give a brief summary about each of them. The session for the political, economic, and the legal access will be addressed by the Mr. Expert for Mekhti Mekhtiev, an expert at the Institute of the Legislation and Comparative Law of the government of the Russian Federation, Moscow. The focus of will be on the political and economic emergency in the pandemic left, how to Russian government handled it, and the ongoing coordination between the capital Moscow and the Russian regions and the provinces in the importance of the enforcing the curfew and the related legal aspects. While the focus of the education will be covered by the expert Professor Maria Ginzburg, Russian Diplomatic Academy linked with the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs, Moscow. Mr. Maria will be addressing the impact of the pandemic on the education system in universities and schools, how Russian universities deal with their students during the crisis and impact for the pandemic on the future education and for the most prominent application and it is a future for the e-learning. The health and the social aspects will be covered by Professor Expert Alina Safonova, teaching instructor at St. Petersburg University, Russia, and it health social efforts for the almost of the important among of the effects of the pandemic. Mrs. Alina will be talk about the extent of the Russian society adaptation to the curfew and extent for the society commitment to social distance and wearing masks and gloves. We'll be also talk about the new enjoyable for the experience in the volunteer for the young Russian men and donated for the delivery of food and the medicine to the citizens on the area will be prevent by the doctor the living house in the order keep them from the being infected will be coronavirus in addition and to health measures taken by the Russian authorities to the calm the pandemic. Welcome for all and will be take for the discussion for the Mr. Murad to arrangement, which is the first expert presenter. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I think we can start firstly with our speakers. At the end, I will tell a little bit about our organization. Maybe we will start with Mehti. Please, could you please, Mehti, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot for introducing me. And I'm very grateful to be part of this very well organized video, as I already found it. Thank you very much. As it's been announced, I'm going to talk about the way how Russia dealt with the pandemic from a legal, economic, and political perspective. So, as we all know, the World Health Organization today is the most spoken organization in the world in the year 2020, and it leads world through the pandemic caused by the COVID-19 disease. And today it owns quite a lot of expertise and experience on how to deal with this virus and this illness. And its recommendations and expertise also includes the experience of Russia, the methods, how it counteracted the illness. And it's quite unexpected due to the image about Russia in nowadays. So, as we all know, in January, the COVID-19 erupted in China, and Russia has a long border with China, but because there were restrictions which were imposed straight after the eruption of this disease, there were barriers implied, and only trade was possible. But while this region is very much integrated with China through tourism and other humanitarian connections and so on, they all were stopped and only trade was in place. At the same time, 2 months later, or about a month and a half later, the pandemic erupted in Central Europe, and the western part of Russia, which is the biggest population in terms of visiting. A lot of them who traveled to Western Europe, they came back home in early March being infected. And the government seems to be wasn't really prepared that the virus can come from the western side because it started in east. So the virus just went across the globe and came to Russia from western side. However, luckily, since January, the Russian government started to prepare for the pandemic. All the resources were consolidated, and in March, the government still was building several hospitals for infected people, and they've been built next to...
تعال بسرعة. جوري قميص الأبيض قميص الأبيض.
Sorry, what was it? Next to the big cities, and they've been constructed for a very, very short period of time, a month and a half or 2 months, but it's been done very quickly. But what was the most important thing about all these restrictions imposed by the government, like lockdown and ban on traveling across the country and abroad? It was economic and legal perspective. So, as we know, Russia is a part of different treaties, European and world one, which implies some democratic principles of government across the globe, and Russia is not an acceptance here. And because of that, Russian basic law and in general legislation is more or less in conformity with the European standards of democracy. And European standards of democracy actually provides a lot of restrictions for restricting human rights, like right to travel and other human rights. And as we know, there is a very strict procedure to implement these restrictions. They should be grounded. But the problem is, no one till today really knows fully what is coronavirus, how it spread, and especially when it just started. And because of that, it was extremely difficult for the government to justify those restrictive measures, whether they in conformity with basic law of Russia, with legislation in Russia, but at the same time, the humanitarian crisis. So the decision was to be in the middle. The lockdown and other restrictions, they were necessary, obligatory, only for some groups of people, like those who are over 65 years old, those who have illnesses, which puts them in a risky position during the pandemic, and those who have been infected, who contacted with those who are infected, and who traveled abroad. For them, the 2 weeks lockdown was obligatory and many other restrictions. For the rest, it was a recommendation. I personally used to go outside, but during the pandemic, the streets were totally empty because 70% of Moscovites, of people who live in Moscow, they've been at home. And of course, cafes, restaurants, and other places, they were closed. And that's why even if you go somewhere, you would have no place to go to visit. So, but what's from economic side? As we know, in Russia, the economy is based on market principles. It's stated in the constitution and so on. But at the same time, the biggest part of the economy is controlled by the government because it owns almost more than 60 and up to 80% of the capital which exists in Russia. It's owned by the government. And despite the Soviet Union, when everything was owned by the government and there was a planned economy, now it's market economy, but it is state capitalism. Because the government can administratively directly direct all companies and entities of Russia to do some particular things like to go to lockdown or to go to work from home and so on. At the same time, because it's state capitalism, all financial losses which occur, they are the financial losses of the state budget. So the state is the one who bears all these risks concerning income and financial issues and so on. So while all those who are in a risky conditions, as I already said, those who are ill, have illnesses or over 65, they've been in lockdown before the pandemic started. That's why the healthcare infrastructure could stay afloat even in May, when Russia became the second most affected, infected country in the world. And a little bit later, at the end of March, the president announced 2 weeks of holidays. What means 2 weeks of holidays in Russia? Under the Russian labor law, holidays, so it was national holiday. So national holidays means that you need to go to work at the same time you get your full salary. But the salaries, of course, were cut for about 20%. So because most of the companies, entities of Russia are owned by the government, and actually the shareholders are the government, and the government is the one who can order how to make the business, more than 60% of people who've been employed before the pandemic, they remain their salaries. And another 20%, they were mostly in the services industries, which was affected quite a lot. And there were also about 20% of Russian shadow economy, when companies pay to hand employees usually are not protected by some social guarantees and so on. And for them, it was quite difficult because they were not employed legally. They couldn't even deliver themselves to the government saying that I lost my job because of the pandemic, and they couldn't even get the package aid from the government. So about 20% of Russia, approximately, it's not the statistics right now, it's just some ideas that it was about 20%. We will know it in autumn. So around 20%, they lost their jobs and they had a very bad situation in terms of finance. But at the same time, still, most of the country, most of the people who worked, they could get their salaries and so on. So, and the last thing, what was very important during the pandemic for the Russian government, where Russia got additional experience, and which was quite interesting, I think, it was how the country is constructed from the government of view. So it's a federal republic, and Federal Republic means that Russia consists of constituent entities. There are 85 constituent entities like regions of Russia, which have their own local government. And the basic law, like constitution and other federal constitutional laws, say that they clearly separate powers of the federal government and local government. And if there are some issues which are within the scope of the particular constituent entity, the territory, then this issue and how to solve them, it is the responsibility of the local government. As soon as these issues goes beyond the borders of this territory, then it is the competence of the federal government. And here we've got some issues when it was quite difficult to manage for some regions the situation with this pandemic, but because the government created from the very beginning a commission which included all sectors of Russian economy, even defense and civil industries and so on, all of Russia with all state bodies, they all were united into a single commission which worked all together to deal with this pandemic. And we've seen that when there were some issues in some part of Russia, then from other parts of Russia, some resources necessary to treat from coronavirus and so on, like equipment or doctors, were sent to in other regions to help with it. And finally, returning to the economy, what is also very interesting is that Russian budget actually gets income from three major industries. It is defense industry, oil, gas, and other natural resources, and agriculture. And interestingly, restrictions almost haven't been imposed to these three most, let's say, fundamental for Russian economy industries. And that's how it dealt with the coronavirus. We've got, unfortunately, a lot of troubles. There were a lot of deaths. It was a humanitarian crisis, but we actually understood that it should be the economy which works for the people and not vice versa as it's been before. Thank you for bothering with my long speech. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry.
Are we, sorry for interruption. Are we going to postpone our questions up to the end of this lecture?
I think it will be better if we firstly listen our experts, maybe about 10 minutes maximum to every person, as I said, I mean to every expert. And after that, we will turn to question and answer session. Is it possible? Okay.
Good.
Yes,
Thank you.
Now I think it's time to give floor to our next speaker, Maria, please.
Okay, good evening, colleagues. Today I will try to describe you, to tell you about the current situation dealing with the educational system in Russia, affecting schools and universities. So in March 2020, Russian Education Ministry recommended all universities and schools to switch to distance learning as a preventive measure against the spread of the coronavirus. Of course, the closure has forced many educational institutions to think outside the box, as we say, and to come up with some innovative and pragmatic solutions in order to provide students with teaching and learning. And the availability of information and communication technologies makes it possible, when physical interactions are no longer available and possible. But we all understand that at the same time, both teachers and students should be ready for these measures. And on the one hand, distance learning, which for the majority of us in Russia and all over the world used to be something more or less unfamiliar, it turned out to be quite simple, but just on the one hand. When the teacher or the professor shares the link to the Zoom with the students and the conference starts immediately, and you don't need any special equipment except your computer and maybe headphones, but at the same time On the other hand, this is possible only when both sides, the students and teachers, have a high level of preparedness and ability to work in these online conditions. And we can't but mention the fact that the internet connection in Russia and I think in other countries, it faced numerous problems dealing with the fact that all people started using the internet connection. And we teachers trying to work online weren't able to react with students face to face, of course, like we used to do it in the classroom. And we had some additional challenges in this respect. For example, we had to structure the assignments more clearly, including some assignments which would make us be able to understand whether the students understand the material or not. And when we as teachers were preparing materials for online classes, we had to pay more attention to time management, and we had to try to put things more clearly. Well, and talking about the examination procedure, I'm talking about the students at the university because, well, these procedures at schools, they are much more simpler and easier. And as for university, I can't say that the process of our examination has changed dramatically, despite the fact that it became on a remote form. Well, and it hasn't changed except perhaps that fact that we gave more essay type assignments. So we had to give tasks, well, dealing with maybe the imagination of the student and not some multiple choice tests as we used to do it. And I think it makes more sense because on the one hand, the complexity of the exam hasn't increased. But there are still less opportunities to use other sources. I mean, students can't, they are not able as a rule to use some other sources on the internet because the format and the time doesn't allow it. And undoubtedly, during our first online exams, the level of anxiety and being nervous, both among teachers and students, it was extremely high. What if Wi-Fi connection cuts out or something happens with my computer or laptop? These were the most widespread questions, and in this respect I can figure out some disadvantages of online teaching process because you're always dependable on your computers, on your laptops, on your iPhones, anything. And offline students they used to know that their final mark or their final exam will never be affected by the internet connection failure or by your typing speed. And apart from it, I would like to especially mention the problem of the so-called academic honesty, because for teachers it was extremely difficult to find out whether the student is really doing the task assignment himself or herself, and doesn't use some so-called aids or doesn't turn to the help of the parents, of the sisters, and so on. And of course, it is impossible to detect all cases of dishonest behavior, but unfortunately some students have already been held accountable for violating exam rules. But the same thing happens every year, even during offline exams. And speaking of the good things, in my view, the exams have been easier because all the teachers, we all understood the level of anxiety and the role it could play during the exam, and students didn't need to spend time getting to the university for consultations or for the exam itself, so they saved some extra hours, or in some cases even days, and they could manage spend it preparing for their exam. And during online consultations, we talked mostly not about the exam itself, but we touched upon some psychological aspects of the exam. And we tried to explain that we are working in our study office, we are humans like like all of you, and for whom the transition to the online teaching was also unexpected and emotionally costly. And to be honest, for some of my elder colleagues, this challenge, transformation into online studying, it was a real challenge due to their age and their digital capability. But by the way, from my point of view, the situation that occurred, I mean the pandemic, it just made us understand that we should become more flexible in our modern society. And tomorrow, or rather today, any of us will have to deal with technological devices and technical issues in this or that way, and how can we stay apart without having some special skills. And now I would like to move on to the question whether we in Russia, whether our schools and universities are going to turn to online education on the whole after the pandemic, starting with the 1st of September, when it is the official day in Russia when students and children go to schools, to universities. Well, as I have mentioned earlier, the pandemic made us understand the value of the real eye-to-eye lessons and communication, but at the same time, it showed us how it is easy and convenient to share our experience at both regional and international scales. And what I'm talking about, firstly, I would like to mention that our government, for example, started financing universities and schools dealing with the question of the so as to supply educational institutions with computers, laptops, and they started special courses for teachers who, due to their ages and their education, who have problems dealing with digital devices. And more than that, nowadays the most popular Russian universities started to digitalize their courses. What do I mean? For example, we all know or have ever heard about Moscow State University of Lomonosov, and it has developed its own platform called University Without Borders, which offers open courses for students from all over the world. And by this way, St. Petersburg National Research University of Information Technologies, Mechanics and Optics also opened free access to its online courses via the Open Educational Portal. And what is most interesting and important that after finishing these courses, students from other institutions from abroad, they received a special diploma, and they can apply for the credit or for the grant, so that his or her university will pay for this course. And I am talking on behalf of the Diplomatic Academy of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And as for our academy, I would like to know that during and after the pandemic, all our professors tried their best in this or that way to keep the educational process and the research activities alive, providing students with numerous online conferences. And what is more interesting and important, that the online format, it provided us with the opportunity to hold conferences with representatives from different universities, from different institutions, and even from international organizations. So in a word, with people all over the world. And in addition to this, our academy has always been known for the quality of the education dealing with languages. And this summer academy provides everyone who wishes with the opportunity to attend online courses of the English language, no matter where you're from and no matter what language scale you possess. And to sum up, well, all of us today, I suppose, have come to the conclusion after the pandemic that we become more and more interlinked and interrelated, and no one says that we should get rid of personal communication with each other, never. But even right now, at the moment, you and me, we are all sharing our interesting experience with each other, using the minimum of our time and finance for traveling abroad, especially in the period when it is quite unsafe still. And of course, no doubt, we should value each other, but at the same time, we should manage to keep pace with the times and make it as much fruitful and beneficial for us. And on the whole, I do think so that maybe distance teaching, it's in the near future, it's waiting for us, and we should try to manage to be more flexible and able to reform our system of education and try to cope with all these difficulties, like, for example, like the pandemic. Yes, and we should try to take some benefits from the situation, because, as I've mentioned, it is extremely convenient to share the lessons or to invite the professors from all over the world, and it won't take you much time and money. So thank you, colleagues, for attention. I will be happy to answer the questions after our speeches.
Thank you so much, Maria. Now I think it's time to listen to our last speaker, Alina. Alina, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. We would like to welcome all the colleagues and start our speech about Russian attitude to the regime of self-isolation in Russia. So on the 29th of March, the regime of self-isolation was introduced in Moscow and Moscow region in order to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Citizens of Moscow and Moscow region were prohibited to move freely around the city. There were only a few cases to go outside. The first one, appealing for emergency medical aid. The second, attending work if it was obligatory. The third, going to grocery stores and pharmacies. And the fourth, taking pets for a walk. Though these precaution measures were also introduced in public places. Most of the shopping malls were closed, and in public places with working personnel, it was obliged to ensure customers and the personnel to keep social distance of 100 meter and of 1.5 meters. Sorry. Also, all public institutions and public transport were provided with hand sanitizers. As a consequence of introducing the mask regime, it was prohibited to serve customers without face masks. On the 30th of March, the same precaution measures were introduced in 24 regions of the Russian Federation. By the middle of April, the regime of self-isolation was introduced practically in every region of Russia. In this case, citizens of the Russian Federation had to adapt to new living conditions. In common, most Russian people were and still are skeptical to the existence of COVID-19. Thus, they inclined to the opinion that introduced regime of self-isolation in Russia was unreasonably strict. Some people consider this regime as a violation of their basic human rights. Therefore, the regime of self-isolation was often violated, especially in regions, because the rules, precaution measures in regions weren't so strict as in Moscow and in St. Petersburg, for example. Unfortunately, there is no official statistic about how many people keep self-isolation regime, but the Russian multinational company called Yandex, they elaborated so-called index of self-isolation that demonstrate the level of urban activity of the citizens. It has 5-point scale rating system. 5-point means that there is almost nobody in the streets, and the 0 means the opposite, that there are a lot of people in the streets. So from the 30th of March to the beginning of May, the average index of self-isolation in Moscow was about 2. It's normal for a self-isolation regime, but in 4 regions that the Ministry of Inner Affairs of the Russian Federation consider and admit as leaders in violation of the regime of self-isolation, the point of the index of self-isolation in this region was about 3.5 points. It's a very high rate. Now I'd like to talk about senior group of population because they are still in the high risk group. In this case, the volunteer movement was established within the all-Russian campaign called We Are Together, or Мы вместе. These volunteers provide support to senior group of people and medical personnel. For example, volunteers buy and deliver products, medicine, and goods of first priority to senior people. And those who have secondary or higher medical education, they can help hospitals by suggesting nursing care help and so on. As for universities, some universities have implemented the same initiatives on volunteer. For example, students on a volunteer basis deliver products to senior professors. And one of the most important point I would like to mention is that students serve on a volunteer basis. They help senior professors to improve their digital literacy in using online platform for distance learning. So to sum up, I can say that most Russian people still violate the regime of isolation, but there are also advantages not advantages, but some people violate the regime of self-isolation, while others try to do their best to help doctors and other medicine personnel. So that's the end of speech, and we will be pleasure to answer all the questions.
Thank you so much, Alina. Now I think it's time to give to Ustaz Dawood.
Thank you a lot for the experts. We can open the discussion with the hand rising for the anyone have any question for the experts, please. Dr. Saad? Dr. Saad Al-Hassani? Anyone have any question for the experts, please?
Yes, yes, doctor.
Yes. Yeah, sorry. I have a question, please.
Yeah.
First of all, my first question to the first speaker. I think he talked about the coronavirus pandemic, which has definitely changed the economic and financial and social perspective. How does Russian government handle this change? I mean, are there certain emergency plans, for example?
Question for Mr. Mehdi.
Yes, yes, for the first speaker.
Very much for your question, for the question. Yeah, it is very hard to say what one country will do because we know that the world is so much globalized that the example. Sweden, they didn't have lockdown because they wanted the economic slowdown, while they had a huge number of deaths, and at the same time, the economy still collapsed. So the emergency for Russia, as it's been before, because we faced several crises earlier in the end of 90s and 2008, the idea is that we accumulate a lot of resources, financial, and you might know that Russia is the third biggest reserves, financial reserves, about more than $500 billion, while the budget is $100 billion. So it means it's already, if all the economy at the same time it just stops, if tomorrow leave half.
So this is
also government need reserves. Yeah. Yes. I hear.
I think. Sorry for interruption, but this makes me understand that the Russian economy, which is naturally a market economy, seems to have better control than that, for example, of privatization economy. I can cite only one example. For example, in Lebanon, the American University Hospital has recently dismissed around 60% of the workforce, and this has added more to the injury of the Lebanese broken economy. So I think what the Russian government, with all the natural resources and all the financial resources, seem to think of an enhanced budget in order to foresee the future, which seems to hide a lot of pressures actually on the budget, on the Russian budget. If I'm right to say so. I think, do you agree with me or not?
Yes, yes, I totally agree. Why this thing didn't happen in Russia and the government continued to pay salaries to the biggest part of the population? Mainly because years before, then the oil price was high and the income for the Russian budget was quite a lot. There was a very strict fiscal rule, which means that above $40 per oil, the price of oil was about $60. So all those parts which has more than $40, they went to the reserves. At the same time, Russia couldn't implement many projects like infrastructure, and at the same time, so it actually limited abilities of the country to develop faster. But at the same time, it provided the nation with some safety and some security, like some reserves. So we lived in a very strict condition in terms of the economy. And because of that, the mass unemployment didn't really happen, and the government still continued to pay. We will have a budget deficit, 100%, we're ready for that. But this budget deficit will be financed from the reserves, which is about $560 billion today, which is quite a lot.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. Thank you very much. I have one more question, but I think this question is for the second speaker, if you don't mind.
Yes.
My question is, Mom, you talked about the online education, which is a new culture, of course, that needs a new mindset. And this new mindset, of course, is the responsibility of all the governments to enhance. But I'm rather concerned, since we have the same experience here in Iraq, and especially in Al-Esraa University College, which is the pioneer actually in applying the online teaching. My question is, I think this online education will be easily seen through our academic evaluation of the studentship, since eye-to-eye exams are no longer valid. So what do you mean by reforming our system, our educational system? Does it impact, for example, the evaluation? Would the evaluation of students and their education or educational standards be influenced, or would it be better, or would it be worse? This is my question.
Okay, thank you for your question. It's very interesting. Well, because there are a lot of thoughts and ideas around this question. And from talking about my students, yes, I was teaching um, the English language, and well, they are not satisfied with the format of online lessons. But at the same time, there are some benefits of online education. For example, if we are talking of courses, which, for example, maybe students from Iraq want to attend some special courses in the diplomatic academy of the Russian Foreign Ministry, and they don't need to change their place of birth, and they don't need to travel abroad, especially in the atmosphere of the pandemic. They can attend some online courses, and after these courses they can receive a diploma. Well, but I'm talking about some courses, not about the whole education system, because from my point of view, our Russian society is not ready for the online education, as well as I think the societies of other countries, because we can see that even the pandemic show that we are not ready. Even though we are the generation of the new technologies, we weren't completely ready for the outbreak and for this online education. That's why I think that maybe online education is the education of the future in the near 20, 30 years. But this period showed that maybe we can try to get out some benefits, and we can help our students, we can exchange our courses, online courses, with the universities abroad, and it will be easy and cheaper. Well, for example, I can give you the example, maybe it is cute to make some courses, for example, of the Arabic language for Russian students, because there are a lot of Russian students who are studying Arabic, and it's difficult to find some good ones, some good courses which will give them the practical Arabic, not just Fusha. So I mean, when I was talking about the online education, I meant that it will substitute the offline education just partly, but not the whole education.
Thank you very much indeed. This is very interesting. If you allow me, I have only one last question to the third speaker, if you don't mind.
All time, Dr. Saad, you can.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm done. I'm done. Thank you very much.
I would ask the Mrs. Maria about what is the next step for the e-learning with the eye-to-eye learning for the next year. We can mix this now when the situation of the pandemic was rise.
Well, talking about the next year, the next educational year, our government and our universities, they promised that we will start our offline education and we will attend universities and schools as we used to do it before the pandemic. But in case of the outbreak, the governmental budget is supposed to give money to finance universities and schools, so as to provide them with equipment and with special courses for the teachers who can't deal with some electronic devices. And I think that a lot of universities, not only in Russia and abroad, will develop international projects dealing with making courses for students from abroad. And maybe they will, well, now, for example, you know that the Diplomatic Academy of Russia and other countries, we have the system of exchange of students. And maybe it will become online because we don't know when the borders will be opened, and maybe it will be the solution.
Anyone have questions, please? I turn this to a question for the Mr. Mehdi. What is the affecting of the learning for the economic in Russia and the other world countries?
Can you please repeat once again? I have some problems with the connection.
I asked you about the e-learning affecting of the economy in the country, the Russian and the other.
I'm so sorry. Probably need to do something with. What was the beginning of the question?
Okay, I repeat you. You have, when you continue the e-learning, can this affecting of the economy in your country?
Or you mean online learning affect the economy? Yeah, thanks a lot for the question. Honestly, it's hard for me to answer to this question. It can affect mostly the demand for goods and services, which are like basic goods and services, because when people go to universities, they use transport, they go to have some food during the lunch and so on and so forth. So here we will see that the decline, and the decline will cause of course the decrease of inflation. And this is, by the way, today is a big problem in Russia, because the inflation goes down lower than the normal level, which is 4%. And this is because there is a very low demand for all goods and services which we used to have. So while staying at home, we actually spend less money. For the market economy, Russian economy is not really very market economy, but still it has some characteristics of it. So this can affect negatively, but I still think that it's not the biggest problem which can happen with the Russian economy. I think it's a problem which can be solved through monetary policy and fiscal policy.
Thank you.
Dr. Dawood, can I add something?
Anyone here have any questions, please?
Yes, Dr. Ashur,
Yeah.
may I ask?
Yeah.
Yes, my question is for the second speaker. I think she's the Professor Maria.
Yeah.
Yes, Miss Maria. Actually, my brother is in Russia and he teaches at a school. He said that since late March, Russian children have been studying online because of the novel coronavirus. He also said that not all the kids have laptops. So how does the Ministry of Education handle this problem?
Thank you for the question. Yes, after the outbreak of the coronavirus, schools and universities demonstrated the fact that they are not supplied with the equipment with appropriate equipment, especially schools.
Because for children especially.
Yes, and I think this is the first question which now tries to tackle to solve the Ministry of Education, trying to supply schools and teachers and students with appropriate equipment, because otherwise the education will become useless. But I can make you sure that this is the first really question, the first problem that our government tries to solve.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
No. Well,
Tamer.
Yes, Dr. Tamer, you can ask.
Yes. My question to Professor Maria, while we are using now online teaching, do we need to change our materials which we are teaching our students?
That's a very interesting question. Yes, you know, when I was teaching the students during this semester, during these 3 or 4 months, I'm used to teaching by textbooks, by printed textbooks, and you know that not all textbooks are given in online versions. Yes, and that is why I even started writing my own book on the English grammar I think, well, maybe it's a good solution because a lot of my colleagues started writing their books, trying to make them maybe more interesting and appropriate, because some of them in the online version we can use presentations, we can make the material more catchy for the eyes of the students. Well, but I don't think that it is connected with the material itself. It can be all the same, but just we can change the way of presentation. So it won't be a dull book, a gray book. It may become an interesting presentation, something like that, I think.
Thank you.
Yes, doctor. Can I ask a question?
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. First of all, I would like to welcome all the professors, and I have actually two questions. The first question is to Professor Maria. Professor, I want to ask you about the future of learning in Russia. Do you think that the e-learning is going to be the future of learning in Russia, like even after the pandemic, like maybe next year, and so on? What do you think?
Well, to be honest, when I was communicating with students, all of them are divided into two separate groups. I mean, with dealing with their opinions. Some of them are strict conservatives, and they say that we will never appreciate online education because we need a teacher himself. And the others said, well, on the one hand, it's very convenient because, as I have mentioned earlier, apart from their main education, even offline, they can attend online courses on getting the maybe the magister degree even, or learning any other language online. For some students, that is appropriate. That is why it's difficult to say whether in Russia, in the near future, we will use only online education. I think it will be a mixture.
Thank you so much. Now, if you don't mind, I have another question to Professor Ilya. We heard a lot about the vaccine, the Russian vaccine, and all the rumors in the news, etc. So I want to know more about that vaccine that we all heard about, in the news, etc.
So is this question to whom?
To Professor Ilya, I think the last speaker.
Alina.
Alina.
Alina. Okay.
For the health system.
Yeah. Did you hear my question, Professor?
Yes, I heard it. So you would like to learn more about Russian vaccine?
Yes. Exactly.
So the point is that, as far as I know, this vaccine will be sold in pharmacies, I think in autumn, and there are different variants of vaccine. There is vaccine for those who are not ill and who are not ill with coronavirus, and there is medicine for those who has its illness. But the problem is that our article, our performance was about social consequences to Russian people, and we don't know a lot about vaccine of that was elaborated in Russia, because we don't have such kind of information. So I think you should clarify it.
Mr. Kasim, if you don't mind, I can add something about the vaccine. So according to the today's speech of Vladimir Putin, because he held a meeting with the government, and they discussed the situation with the vaccine and how to protect population in Moscow, in Russia, against the second wave of pandemic. And they said that maybe in the third decade of August, Moscow government will provide free base vaccination to whole population who want to make it. And it means that they already tested this vaccine, free samples of vaccine on some volunteers from Russian army, 15% during the about maybe 4 weeks ago. They tested positively, and I mean that vaccine really work. And now they started to test freely on civil. So, and I think that Russia maybe will be the first state who will really introduce the vaccine against coronavirus.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mohammed. Lastly, when I transfer the talk about Mr. Murad, but on behalf of the Dean of the College of Al-Esraa University, Dr. Abdulrazak Al-Majidi, I offer my thanks and my appreciations for the expertise and my colleague for the presence. And I would like to take Mr. Murad to talk about the Middle East Association. It is related for the governmental Moscow University and what is the efforts can prepared for this association.
Thank you so much, Ustaz Dawood. Frankly, our organization is an independent. It's like an NGO. It's non-governmental organization. First of all, good evening, dear colleagues. It's a great honor to be with you online. First of all, I would like to thank our speakers, Mekhti, Maria, and Alina, for overwhelming speeches, and it was really so amazing. And of course, I want to thank Dr. Walid and Al-Esraa University Management Administration for their initiative to organize this meeting. Now, Iraq is one of the vital partners for us in the MENA region especially, and we are glad to extend our cooperation in different fields. With your permission, I would like to speak briefly about the Russian Middle East Association. Our organization is a public platform that brings together researchers of political, historical, cultural, humanitarian, and other processes in Middle East and North African region. Since its foundation on September 15, 2018, the main objective of our association are to strengthen mutual understanding and respect through interaction between representatives of the government and public person in Russia and the countries of Middle East and North Africa, of course, because it's the Russian Middle East Association. We are helping to identify and promote commonalities to address Commonwealth threats and ensuring a high degree of respect for cultural diversity and heritage of the nations. The Russian Middle East Association activities mainly deal with the publication of analytical reports, organizing roundtables like this, lectures, conferences, high-level forums with participation of officials, sometimes public person, academician. So also we provide research and educational trips. For example, during the last 2 years, we organized about 5 international projects. One was visit to Iran, to Lebanon, then in Egypt, in Morocco, in Tunisia. So we are working on international base. And also we provide as well as a provision of expert commentary and analysis by an international network of renowned scholars and industry experts. We're mainly focusing on the tradition of finding dialogue-based solution to the most pressing problems of contemporary society. And finally, I just want to add that the Russian Middle East Association is open to every individual who agrees with our declaration of values and is ready to contribute to the stated goal. Our main goal is to bring Russia and countries and societies of the Middle East and North Africa together. Dear colleagues, today we took part in our first, hopefully not the last one, joint partner event of the Russian Middle East Association and the Al-Esraa University, Iraqi University. And our experts have shared with you Russian experience in fighting against the pandemic, which is a common threat to all humanity. So in addition, such events allow us to join efforts to counter common threats And we should understand that our strength is in unity. And if you don't mind, I want to add about one more comment to Dr. Saad Al-Hassani question to Mehdi about that how Russia controls the economic situation. So I'm also not only, how to say, a public person, but I'm also a specialist in international relations, especially Middle East countries. And we discussed with a lot of peoples from different parts of the world, even from Middle East, the situation, and we called it like international order after the pandemic. According to the last situation, we see that, how to say, the most successful countries who can fight against pandemic successfully was some countries with strong regime. For example, China can resolve the situation, can handle so easily, not so easily of course, but in comparison with Italy, with the United Kingdom, for example, yes, they do it more easily. Why? Because they controlled everything. They controlled healthcare systems. They controlled economy. And it means when you have a tight control system, you can handle with some problem, with some crisis situation most effectively. And we see that they are really so effective. And appealing to the opinion of my colleague Mekhti, that in Russia, the majority of economic, they're really controlled by government, or half shareholders is government. And it's really in time of some crisis, for example, during the Corona time, it was really so successful, because in comparison with other countries, Russian losses during the quarantine regime, so not so much. For example, even in Turkey, the situation was in economy was a little bit difficult in comparison with Russia. So thank you for your attention and for your time. And if you have any question about the situation or something more,
I would like just to comment on what you said, Mr. Murad. Since we are talking about the economic problem, because the pandemic is an economic problem. For example, I can easily recall that the US and Canadian governments actually decided to give some kind of financial compensation, especially for the daily workers. Has the Russian government thought of taking similar steps?
Mehdi, do you want to ask, or I can if you want? Okay.
Yeah, briefly. Yeah, thanks a lot for the question. In the United States, we all heard that $1,200 for everyone and so on and so forth. 2 days ago, there was a statistics of the US Labor Department, which said that only 30 million people got aid. 30 million people is about 9% of the US population, but they've been saying that it will be for all. Why they didn't give to all? Because still 80% of Americans had some income. In Russia, it was a little bit different. The most important thing here is there were new taxes imposed on financial, on accounts of bank accounts, deposits, and so on, which exceeds more than 1 million rubles and so on. And increase the taxes for those who are rich. At the same time, mostly Russian provided assistance to those who have children. And this was, for Russia, it was the most effective way, because all data about us, all records are in the tax agency, and tax agency see that who has children and so on. It was the easiest way to deliver money to people who need some additional aid. And mostly they were those families which have children. And it's also within the new Russian policy where all the economy should turn around the family, because we have a demographic crisis. But also, as I already said, other people who were employed who were not legally employed, they had difficulty. They couldn't come to the government and say that I lost my job because of the pandemic, because they didn't have a labor contract. They were not paying taxes and so on. This was a huge problem, but honestly, I don't know how the Russian government is going to fix this problem. It's still a problem and probably continue to be. But mostly here, government helped to those who had children. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And also situation with small-scale business, because Russian government create a list of how to say, most suffered industry, I mean, most suffered business, and they provide about maybe 50 or 30% of their benefit before pandemic. They because provide finance, if I'm not mistaken, because it's not only for ordinary person, I mean ordinary population, but also for business. Of course, it's not enough because there are a lot of criticism on the government activities, but how to say, it's not easy to handle. But in comparison with different countries, we do it more.
Okay, Dr. Ashur,
Okay.
can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Dr. Walid Latif from Baghdad University, College of Languages. I'd like to thank our Russian colleague, Mr. Murad Sadiqzadeh, Ms. Maria, Ms. Alina, Mr. Mekhti Mekhtiev, for this very important information about Russian experience with COVID-19. And I like to continue these activities between Russian Federation and the Republic of Iraq. I mean, in education side, in science side. And I like to thank Mr. Dr. Ashur for your activities and the idea of the lecture. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Walid. Thank you. I would like to thank all colleagues and all the presenters for the total information. I would like to more coordination and more cooperation between the Russia universities and the experts and the other colleague in the Russia University. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for all, especially for those who organize. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ashur.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Hassan.
So now,
Thank you, Dr. Ashur.
Thank you a lot, Dr. Thomas.
okay, goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.